Well, hello, everybody. I'm Vaughn Renner. For those of you who don't know me, I am a past president of the ASLA, and I was the first chair of the Climate Action Committee for the ASLA and worked as on the task force for creating the Climate Action Plan. But I'm here in Seattle. I've been here for 9 years now, and I'm really excited today to be able to be part of presenting to you about the new, a recent anyhow, Washington chapter Climate Action Plan, Climate Action Committee, excuse me. So anyhow, I just wanted to introduce everybody. I'd like to start, just a second. I'd like to start just by reading to you the land acknowledgement that's part of the Climate Action Plan. It reads as follows. The ASLA and its members acknowledges that Indigenous peoples are the original sovereign nations and the stewards of these lands. Our work occurs on the unceded lands of many Native nations and is built on displacement and dispossession. It is with respect that we seek to honor and collaborate with Native nations and their peoples to better understand the relationship between the Indigenous peoples and the land. And we also recognize that the United States has been built on the forced labor of African descendants. Our society and its landscapes are the heirs and benefactors of their core struggle, which we recognize and seek to rectify. Through our actions, we wish to move towards creating collaborative, accountable, and respectful relationships. So what we're going to do today, I'm just going to give you a quick intro here, and then Stephanie Loomis, who is the chair of the Washington Climate Action Committee, is going to describe all the different things that the committee is already undertaking. I'm very excited about this because they're just a really dynamic group of people that are really working together here and doing wonderful things. And Washington is such a center of really addressing the climate crisis that it's very helpful. Then I'm going to give you a quick overview. It'll be a very quick overview about the Climate Action Plan and the field guide, just to be able to give you an idea of the structure. And then Steve Austin from Washington State is going to talk about what's going on in the Washington in the legislative efforts in Washington. We were such a leader in recognizing it across the nation. And then we're going to really try to go quickly so that we get a good 15 minutes to have open discussion at the end to really kick off this climate action in Washington chapter. I did want to give a little bit of a preview, just that the ASLA, a background. I mean, there's long supported efforts to address the impacts of the climate crisis through, but they really accelerated in 2019 when we formed the Climate Action Committee to provide direct member involvement in all of the policy and action. So the emphasis has been on advocacy, on generating and providing information and data on climate issues and nature-based solutions, and also broad collaboration. A key to this increased action has been the work on building a regional and national climate action network. So chapters have been supported in forming these climate action committees, working with the regional chapters to provide information and education in a whole lot of ways around the shared climate crisis impacts. And as it's grown, they've also been working a lot more together, the representatives, and have been part, most recently, which I think was a great acceleration of it, was that the network, the chapter representatives met with the board of trustees and the chapter presidents for discussion groups for a couple of hours during their spring meeting. So it's pretty exciting to see this really growing and see where we go with it. So I'm going to let Stephanie and Abby tell you about the Climate Action Committee, and then I'll come back and tell a little more about the plan itself.
Great, thanks, Vaughn. So hi all, I'm Stephanie Loomis, and I'm the chair of WASLA's Climate Action Committee, and I'm a landscape architect at Walker Macy here in Seattle. As a quick intro, I'll say that after growing up in Seattle, I attended UW's Community Environment and Planning undergrad program before diving into landscape architecture. and the world of hurricanes and resiliency on the East Coast. A few years ago, I ultimately and excitedly returned back home to Washington. Like you all, I care deeply about our place, its environment, people, and its future collective health, joy, and resilience. And I'm so excited to have this opportunity to work with the committee members and you all as we tackle climate change here in Washington. Could any committee members present please turn on their video and give a wave? Great. We've got a great group here from many firms and institutions that all help to pull together this inaugural webinar, and the supporting resources we'll share with you today. And know that if you're interested in joining us, it's not too late. You can visit the link on the screen, wasla.org/climate, which will show you how to reach out to us. So next slide. The Climate Committee started meeting in the beginning of this year. Our first task was to actually pick up and read the Climate Action Plan and Field Guide. In cracking the documents open, we were all excited and impressed by the depth and breadth of the plan. However, we felt overwhelmed. We didn't know which PDF we should dive into first, and it was challenging to keep track of what was included in each document. So our first committee goal was to break down the plan and figure out ways to help you all dive in without hesitation. So this resulted in the CAP cheat sheet, which is pictured here, and can be downloaded at that same website, wasla.org/climate. The front reviews how the plan is organized into 3 documents, including the executive summary, ASLA's climate action plan, and the field guide. The documents have overlap in their shared goals, initiatives, and objectives. However, when it comes to taking action as a practitioner, the field guide is what you want to reference. So on the next slide, to support the field guide, on the back of the cheat sheet, we developed a concise table of contents that shows the various topics and where you can find them within the field guide. This is ready to be printed out as a quick reference. It can sit on your desk. We've already found it super helpful ourselves as we navigate through the various toolkits provided in the field guide. So now Abby will talk you through the Washington State specific climate action resource list we're putting together.
Sure, thanks, Stephanie. So we have a lot of resources that are local to Washington, and what we want to do is similar to the national level field guide. We want to compile all those local Washington resources so that they're in one spot and really easy to access on their website. We've just gotten started on this, and as you can imagine, there are tons and tons of resources out there. We're going to be organizing them roughly by the table of contents of the field guide. So if you have any resources that you've used that you've found helpful or think might be helpful, it can be anything from your firm's climate action plan to maybe there's some a tribal network of committees and folks who are working on climate goals themselves, maybe researchers at a university that you know of, any of that really. Just go on to our website and yeah, you'll find where to fill out that information. Thanks.
Thanks, Abby. So as a backbone of the committee, we're planning a series of webinars related to the Climate Action Plan. Our hope is that these webinars will be a platform for Washington State landscape architects to learn from one another and adjacent experts on climate action topics. By sharing our research, development, and lessons learned from applicable projects, we can build on each other's work in order to respond more rapidly to climate change. We think this will be a great opportunity to help us all advance together. Sharing is caring. Am I right? As our first topic, we'd like to focus the next webinar on climate drawdown, a vital pillar of the CAP. We'll learn more about Washington State net zero laws and how they support actions from the climate drawdown toolkits. And we like to focus or showcase a local firm or practitioner and how they've incorporated the Pathfinder tool into their projects. This will be a great opportunity to learn more about Pathfinder, which is a carbon drawdown tool that Vaughn and Steve will mention later in today's webinar, and how to fold carbon drawdown into your own practice. Please do reach out if you have applicable work and interest in supporting the Climate Drawdown webinar or any ideas for future webinars. Thank you, and we'll have some time at the end of this presentation to share ideas if they come up as well. And now I'll hand it back to Vaughn, who is one of the contributing authors of the Climate Action Plan, a member of the ASLA Climate Action Task Force, and lucky us here in Washington State.
Well, I want to just give a brief background of why. Why was this done now? Why are we taking climate action now? And really, the global climate we change phase is that the Earth's heating at an increasing rate, approaching a level of warming that's endangering the ability of our ecosystems to survive. And to address this crisis, we have to achieve net zero emissions. We have to restore our ecosystems to increase biodiversity. We have to adapt our built environment to inevitable changes because they already are taking place and they will continue. So landscape architects play a really critical role in addressing the impacts of climate change. The IPCC, which is the United Nations body for assessing, they've been assessing the science and making projections and working through it. And they released their AR6 report in, I believe it was in April in the spring. And some of those findings are really critical. So they include the fact that human activities have caused global warming, unequivocally caused global warming. There are widespread and rapid changes in the Earth's environment that have occurred. We all know this, but it's reinforcing that the climate change is affecting weather and climate extremes across the globe, with the whole global systems are changing, and future changes are unavoidable, but can be limited by emission reduction. They also said that rapid transitions across all sectors and systems are necessary to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. And I think this is particularly important, that prioritizing equity, climate justice, social justice, inclusion, and just transition can enable adaptation and climate resilient development. And this is one of our really critical messages. We can do things about this. There's a lot we can do, and that we need to keep moving forward and doing it in order to keep, maintain a equitable and livable world. So one of the really important things is we have to do our part. And that's why we really undertook doing this. As we increasingly experience the impacts of the climate and diversity crisis, we know we need to act faster. So we're trying to really accelerate it. And I think it's important to recognize that nearly 75% of the world's emissions come from the urban built environment, and 35% of that is outside the buildings. This is the area where we work. So that's why we've moved forward on it. So the Climate Action Plan, we developed this in a spirit of great optimism. And I think this is one of the really important things we all need to recognize. We have to have hope and optimism because we can make a difference. And whereas there's a lot less sort of climate change denialism these days, there's a lot more doomism. And it's up to us to really help really counteract that, so that people will make change instead of just sort of giving up. So it's a call to action to escalate the climate crisis response. So it's a real opportunity for landscape architects to elevate their role. So there's a lot of good reasons to do it, and to get on a pathway to zero emissions. So we all understand that achieving this vision depends on creating great change in our own business operations, and the entire supply chain, the services, that's all part of design landscapes. So we developed a very strong vision and we did a vision for 2040. This is a living document, but we set that as a real goal point for us right now, to envision leveraging our collective power and growing new partnerships with industry partners to achieve a zero emission profession by 2040. So we're really qualified to bring all of the pieces together and to plan and design with communities to prepare themselves for a changing world. Our vision, to outline, oops, I'm sorry. Too many things change at once. Sorry. We envision communities that become stronger and healthier because they're committed to drawing down carbon, restoring ecosystems, increasing biodiversity, reducing reliance on vehicles, and ensuring that equitable access that even the IPCC has said we need to have. The ASLA climate action is grounded in global collaboration and advocacy. So the CAP is really organized around the Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted by the United Nations in 2015 as an urgent call to action on all of the issues that were occurring with the climate, with the environment changing. In 2021, the ASLA worked with the International Federation of Landscape Architects to develop the Climate Action Commitment. And this, we presented this at the UN Conference of the Parties, this COP26 in Scotland. But it's good to feel that part of that community, that this is support from over 70,000 landscape architects, 77 nations. So it's a real spirit of working together. So the Climate Action Commitment notes that the key to solving the climate crisis is designing with nature. And so through nature-based solutions and technological innovation, that we're really qualified to, and these are the big goals, protect and repair global ecosystems, to foster human health, well-being, and happiness, to cool the environment, to draw down atmospheric carbon. And so that commitment is the framework for the Climate Action Plan and Field Guide. So you can see that this everything has built on what's gone before and enriched it and pulled it together. So the Climate Action Plan and the Climate Action Field Guide are two documents, but they're also built not only on all these global initiatives, but also upon long-term initiatives that the ASLA has had about resilience and sustainable communities and green infrastructure, lots of advocacy, lots of work on climate policy. But I think one of the things that we all recognize in our work, and it's important to know here, that the plan, any plan, always depends on the guidance and implementation from the community. So it really, the CAP was created in direct response to our community, which is the landscape architecture members. And we are thinking of it in a bigger envelope. Both of these documents are completely open to anybody. It's not limited to members. We know that we have to have a really inclusive kind of approach for the future. So it had member requests, it had input from chapters, input from the Climate Action Committee, by member surveys. And it also incorporated a lot of work that had gone before that's directly in this one document, so you don't have to go as many places. So that included the ASLA Smart Policies for Changing Climate that was created by a Blue Ribbon panel when I was president in 2017, the ASLA Climate Advocacy, as well as the survey. So the plan structure includes the two documents, and it outlines ambitious goals and actions. And it's a living document, so we're constantly putting new things into it. So what the work that Stephanie and Abby talked about that this committee is doing really is the kind of thing that gets incorporated and becomes part of this body of information and assistance. So the Climate Action Plan charts a plan of action for the organization, for the ASLA. Guide, it really is part of DIVIDE, it's part of the strategic plan. It's guiding development of initiatives and policies and programs. And it sets out steps for the design and planning, of projects along with business operations to achieve adaptation and mitigation goals. So there are three major goals. We call them goal topics in a way, because goals is much more complex than that. But the first one is practice. It's really about scaling up climate positive approaches. The second part is equity, that we have to empower communities, and advocacy, because we have to really build coalitions. So these are the goals for both documents. And then within those goals, we have 6 initiatives. There are 2 for each of those goal areas. And those initiatives refer back again to the IFLA commitment. So it's all this structure or framework. So I'm going to just show, I thought what I'd do is just show a few examples, a little bit of examples of how they're structured in the relationship between the Climate Action Plan and the Field Guide, and what the Field Guide's about, because as Stephanie said, that's what we really need to focus on. So I'm going to start with carbon drawdown. It's a big part, but it's not the only part or even maybe the most important part, but it's a huge part. And it's something we are really working with getting our hands around now. So we're starting out and say the ASLA itself is working to reduce operational carbon emissions, operational and embodied carbon emissions by our work and engagement. And it's an ambitious goal, but we really do think we can do it. And so starting in 2022 at our meeting in San Francisco last fall, we engaged with a company called Honeycomb Strategies, and they worked through our operations both at the Center for Landscape Architecture, but also in all of our operations, of which our meeting is a big part, to develop a baseline of where we are with carbon emissions right now, where we are with embodied carbon, and then they're developing measures to achieve that goal. So we should get some results in the guideline later this month, or at least by June. We're making it very important that it's a transparent process that supports the members and the firms and the organizations to help everybody. So it also is sort of a model for zero emission business operations, zero emission landscape architecture projects, zero emission economic growth, and zero emission landscape architecture product marketplace. So we know saying zero is a big thing, but we are confident that we're going to be able to do it and help others do it too. So the Climate Action Plan has these particular kinds of sort of actions. And this is where, when you look at the cheat sheet, it says 71 actions. There are 71 very specific actions that the ASLA is undertaking right away and will be working on in order to accomplish this. So within the, I don't expect you to read this, but I think it's kind of helpful just to know that you've got these kind of visual clues sort of in the way the Climate Action Plan and the field guide are organized. So in the Climate Action Plan, it has objectives and actions that are for the organization, but there's a similar thing that we'll look at in a minute in the field guide. So that, and then in the Climate Action Plan, every one of these 6 initiatives has metrics. So we have some ways set out. These are some examples of how we will tell if we're being successful, if we're doing what we aim to do. So, so key metrics here, for example. And the other thing is I want to point out that this all builds on things we've done before. So we're talking about the Climate Positive Design Challenge, which we'll talk about the Pathfinder a little more. We're starting climate awards, really acknowledging this as part of our award system. We're working on climate and biodiversity positive commitments. We have a whole movement really to look at biodiversity, which in many ways is very related to the climate crisis, but has its own issues and its own crisis that we're having to deal with. And then we're building the things we've been working on for years, sites and LEAD, and we're also using metrics from other organizations. So the Trust for Public Land 10-minute walk score is a good example of how to achieve some of these changes. And just the kinds of things to watch out for that are going on right now. This is just an interesting one. There's a lot of articles coming out in the dirt that get sent out to all of us by email, but you can go on the webpage at the ASLA and read any of them. And one of the ones that was really interesting was in April, the ASLA was part of a meeting about embodied carbon data and creating tools and resources of a whole bunch of organizations getting together in a roundtable saying we're going to all do this together so we can start sharing this information so we're not in our silos. And this actually was a meeting here in Seattle convened by the Carbon Leadership Forum at University of Washington, also headed up by Architecture 2030, the Living Building Future Institute, the U.S. Green Building Council, Building Transparency. So the collaboration is really going to be accelerating the transition of the built environment towards positive environmental outcomes through sort of shared design and material choices. Now I'm going to dive into the field guide just a little more. So while the Climate Action Plan presents what the ASLA and its members undertake as a body, the Climate Action Field Guide is detailed toolkits of actions that can be undertaken, and it's divided up by individuals, by firms and organizations, and what you can do within your community. So it's really a huge resource for education and for practice. And the purpose is to really help landscape architecture, both professionals and the students, become better climate advocates. It's a really rich source of information. It's very useful. It has lots of links throughout. And this is where, as a living document, there's more of these resources available all the time. And so we're enhancing it, regularly updating it, enhancing it online. The ASLA is working on a new web page organization, which is going to help this. So we'll start to be able to interact with this document much more easily. The carbon drawdown, once you get into the field guide, there also are a set of objectives. There's 7 objectives for each of the 3 goal areas, and they're divided between the 2 different initiatives. So for example, the carbon drawdown about achieving embodied and operational emissions really focuses on climate positive landscapes, again, on the transportation, on energy use issues, whereas climate resilience, which is also part of the practice, really talks about communities and expanding ecological services. So these are 7. I'm not expecting you to read them and understand them, but just to know, you go to the document and you can get these. Then just to step into it a little further, the carbon drawdown, the objective number 1, for achieving climate positive landscapes, it has a lot of key strategies laid out, and some of them are to measure and improve the carbon footprint of your projects, to reduce embodied carbon from materials, and this involves, of course, a lot of collaborative work, eliminate emissions from site impacts and operations, increase carbon sequestration through nature-based solutions. So and then there's a lot of information about those. Once again, I don't expect you to read this, but to recognize that what you have is a kind of a really simple summary of key climate actions to take. And this is following the guidance of the advocacy, the Climate Action Committee Advocacy Guide that was created a couple of years ago, where it divides up. So this is just a summary of these actions. But you can see that you have certain ones for yourself, and a lot of it's like getting educated. And again, that theme of really continuing with efforts that we've, not reinventing everything. So CITES has a lot of good information about this. So it comes up. Then what can you do as a part of your firm or your organization? Move the marketplace, how to create plans within your firm. So it's a lot of information and ideas about how to actually do these things. And then with your community, and I always think this is an interesting about educating every client, because I think sometimes one of the things that people don't think about as much as you're coming out of school, I know I didn't, is that you're really going to be an educator the rest of your life, because for every project and every client, you're going to be having a lot to educate them about in order for them to learn about the systems and the ecosystems and the interactive sort of landscape that we find ourselves in. So then we also have each of the 6 has a toolkit. So for carbon drawdown, it's the drawdown toolkit. And this is where there's lots and lots of key actions, why those actions matter, strategies for doing it, and lots of resource links. And I often suggest that that one of the things you could do to really kind of get more familiar with using this field guide is just go to one of the toolkits and kind of print it out and take just those pages and dig into it and understand all that's there. You really can't just print it out, because it's the links that really count for a lot, but use the links and just keep it as a separate document. It's very helpful. So for example, in the carbon drawdown, we have, I just pulled out 4 particular links. There's links to the Carbon Positive Design Challenge, provides the Pathfinder tool that we're going to be talking about more in the future WASLA meetings, that compare your climate emissions of your project over time. And the Building Transparency EC3 tool that has the environmental product declarations and building impact calculators. So, you know, that can help you to start picking tools at picking materials that have lower embodied carbon. And then you have things like NACTO, the National Association of City Transportation Officials, has all kinds of design guides for pedestrians, bicycles, public transit, and things that really address some of those issues. And then the other thing that that's going to just keep growing and that's been great is that there's a real spirit of sharing information that's arisen over the last few years, and really all helping each other, knowing that, you know, everything we do together really lifts the boat. And so an example of this that's in there is the Sasaki Carbon Conscious app, which is one that really starts to talk about carbon impacts and helps you think about those from the early stages of planning and design. And there's a number of other firms that have done this, and I know we have local firms, and so really understanding what all they are and getting them in one place so that we all benefit from each other's work is very helpful. So we have a I just wanted to go into this climate positive design very briefly, just say, because I was really excited. Pamela Conrad, who is the founder of this and the Pathfinder tool, and did a lot of the work on it as a part of the LAF, one of the LAF fellows. She recently released her CPD report. I got it a couple of weeks ago, I guess, and it's just so positive. What I love about this is just an example of the generosity that's inherent in terms of this collaboration, that provide free and accessible tools, resources, and guidance. So it's really just a great tool, and we should all get familiar with it. So I'm going to hit not as much, but a little more on one of the others that the WASLA Climate Action Committee thought we really need to have a lot of focus on, and that's the issue of climate agency. This is one of the equity. We have some really innovative work being done in how to work with communities and how to work with indigenous peoples that are going on in the Northwest here. So it's an area that's particularly strong, and this whole idea that we have to just center equity in everything we do. Policy decisions for centuries really about land use and zoning, transportation have had negative health, safety, and economic impacts on Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. So advancing the equitable development, just like the IPCC even said, is core to all climate action. This one again, in the CAP, it has the outlines of major actions that the ASLA is going to do. And they have metrics for their success. So this is the success of the organization to really, and one of the key things is doing things, building their own internal capacity, supporting creation of green business and jobs, and developing an equity measure, because we need to find yet more ways to equitative. And then they spell out, the climate agency spells out its own, within the field guide, its own objectives. And they really focus around building community, understanding injustice, knowing yourself. So it's strategies. And I love this as strategy to focus on what matters most. You know, we really need, and start by listening and then share. Listening is listening really is everything. So it has, again, with the key climate actions to take within the field guide for yourself. And again, a lot of it has to do with volunteering and educating yourself, and then within your organizations to really hire and retain. Use equity as one way of hiring and retaining, and who to partner with, and to really look at equity every time you think about any of this work. It really focuses on ending discrimination, and it all focuses hugely on collaboration. And I think that collaboration is maybe the real key to where we go now with our things. Again, you have a toolkit, climate engagement toolkit, and just some of the kinds of things. One of the things is a lot of things about citizen science, and the EPA is just creating more and more of these in the government. So this one, like, is one of the links is the air sensor toolbox from the EPA. It's helping how to help people recognize their conditions and their problems and their issues, and is a real first step to doing something about it. Of course, we got all the ESRI, ArcGIS, Living Atlas of the World, and then we have things like Streetwise, which these are these different private organizations. This one is a way to help communities document those assets they have. And the National Public Health Assessment Manual. Again, this is again related to the EPA. So we have a lot of resources like that, and we'll just keep adding to them. So I know that's a quick overview, and sometimes you'll feel like it's a fire hose, but maybe it gives you some clues of how to dig into this. And also if maybe it creates some of the questions of what we should work hardest to answer in our future webinars. And now I want to turn it over to Steve Austin to talk a little bit about legislation in Washington.
Thank you, Vaughn. So what I'm going to do very briefly is just catch everybody up to as where we are in terms of the laws in Washington. What the ASLA is challenging us to do, the laws in Washington are requiring us to do. So next, please. So what we've seen in Washington is that they have now put into place the most comprehensive and ambitious slate of climate and energy policies of any US state, and perhaps even in the Western Hemisphere. Next, please. So for example, here's some of the various laws that are in place. There's a law that requires all of our electricity to be emission-free by 2045. Next. Clean building standards with energy efficiency for certain buildings, certainly, but I would expect that we'll see more of this coming. Next, please. A huge one is that there's a new law that says no new fossil fuel powered cars or light trucks will be sold after 2035. I think a lot of people haven't wrapped their heads around that yet. Next, please. And so importantly, and as Vaughn mentioned a lot, the centering of justice in all that we're doing relative to these laws and actions is vital. So next. The centerpiece of all of the climate laws is the Climate Commitment Act, which legally mandates net zero by 2050. This means the end of fossil fuels in this state, as well as industrial emissions for certain things such as cement and steel. Next, please. This seems radical, but the reasoning is found in the legislative record. Climate change is officially enshrined in state law now as an existential crisis, meaning if we don't adequately address the crisis, we risk losing everything. But state legislators also saw an opportunity for Washington to lead the nation and the world into this new era. So what is this law all about? Next, please. Next. This law is initially about how much it will cost polluters to continue to pollute with carbon emissions. Next. But eventually it'll be about how do we end greenhouse gases in Washington state. Next. So here are some of the highlights of what this particular law does. Next. All greenhouse gas emissions will be capped at certain decreasing levels in Washington each year until 2050. Next. Many greenhouse gas polluters will have to pay the Department of Ecology for the right to pollute, with those rights declining yearly. Next. Some greenhouse gas polluters will get allowances for free, but those allowances will still decline. Next. The money raised by selling the right to pollute will be invested in climate mitigation and adaptation, guided by equity and justice for overburdened communities and tribal nations particularly. Next, please. And what I really want to do is just kind of use this as a teaser for hopefully everybody to come back as we begin to talk about these issues in more detail. I think this chart is the most important chart for all of us and the rest of our professional lives at least here in Washington. What this chart shows is how greenhouse gas emissions will be phased out over time, so that we will get essentially to net zero by the year 2050. The next 10 years, the state is planning on reducing pollution by 50%. So these next 10 years will be vital for us to figure out how we deal with what happens to our materials and construction methods, transportation, all of these things implicated by the ending of greenhouse gas pollution. So that's, again, like I said, hopefully kind of a teaser for you to come back later to talk about how we're going to do this in Washington State. We'll have more details on that, but thank you for listening, and that's it for me. Oh, sorry, I realize now there was
Well,
other.
yeah, hey, you had a lot of little activity there.
That's fine. Sorry. So yes, that's the idea. All of those things are implicated in this law, which obviously concerns all of us as landscape architects. So now I'm done. Thank you, Vaughn.
Okay, so we'll go back to Stephanie to kind of lead us in discussions and tell us where to get more information.
Thanks, Steve and Vaughn. Yeah, so here is a QR code and the website at asla.org/climate, where you can download the PDFs of the climate action plan and the field guide. And then all the resources that we talked about earlier on today, those are at our WASLA website, wasla.org/climate. And now we'd like to open it up. We've got Steve, the expert of Washington State law. We've got Vaughn, one of the authors of the climate action plan, and the committee here on the phone. And we'd love to hear about any ideas any of you have or questions you have about any of those topics. And we'll just open it up. You should all be able to share your video and mic if you so want to share, or you can type questions into the comments. So yeah.
We had one question, is this being recorded? Which we are recording it, and our goal is to host these online so that other people can access them.
Yes, this will be posted onto the wasla.org/climate website, so that for those who weren't able to join, they can get this rundown of the climate action plan.
I'll also mention that in addition to downloading the documents on the ASLA website, there's a lot of other resources. There's recordings of presentations that were made in September at the conference, and recordings and links to some of the things that other chapters have done and different kinds of things. So there's a lot of information you could go get there that we keep adding to all the time. So
I have a few more questions rolling into the chat now. I'll read some of them. Is there a guide being formed that notes what are the best carbon capturing plants?
I don't know if there's one specifically for Washington State. Vaughn, do you know if there's general resources in the climate action plan about that?
there aren't specific resources about that, but I think there's a lot more information that's becoming available. You know, a lot of them, like recognizing that plants like mangroves and your different, it's one of the huge values of wetlands that we've done such a great job of filling across the country.
But I'm making a note that maybe that's something.
But I think it'd be a really
note.
good thing to do, and if anybody can participate or contribute to that, would be wonderful.
Where is all the electricity going to come from to charge the EV cars? Great question, Steve. What do you think?
I don't have an answer. I think, you know, right now in Washington State, 70% of our energy use comes from fossil fuels. We've basically maxed out all of our hydropower possibilities. So that leaves wind and solar primarily. As a land use planner, I'm very concerned about something called energy sprawl as we try to transition everything that we use fossil fuels for now over to electricity. Where's that going to come from? So I don't really have a great answer. You know, maybe one of the answer is that we don't have that many personal electric vehicles that are car sized, certainly. So that's a huge discussion. And we're trying this, this is the first time this has ever been tried. So we're going to find out.
And I know that's something that we've been talking about on the committee, is really understanding what's going on there, what's currently happening in Washington State, what's being planned for where all this green electricity is going to be placed on the land and how it impacts the ecology of Washington State. So that's something that we're hoping to gain an understanding of and see how landscape architects could possibly be a part of it. And then I think it's also a part of, planning as well, planning communities that are close together where you don't need cars as much in a future that doesn't depend as much on electricity. And Nancy Roddle, if you wanted to share about what's happening at the UW Green Futures Lab, please share your face and tell us about it.
I think my face is shared. I don't know, the screen is what I'm seeing.
Anne might be able to focus it onto you.
First, I just want to commend ASLA and WASLA for developing these tools and making them available, and having the webinar, and looking forward to more webinars, because I agree it's really the issue of our time and of our profession. And so the Green Futures Lab is developing 2 guides, and then we have we're setting up a web page. We are like 99%, I don't know if you can see this, of designing the climate responsible city. It's really focused on urban design. So I've had 2 interns over the last year working on that, and I have 2 interns just starting who are going to be developing a sequel to it that really focuses more on the materials and case studies. And if they can be contributing to ASLA's and WASLA's websites and living documents, that would be awesome. And then the third piece is one of our students who I advised had a Vala scholarship in Sweden, and he's developed a guide on the use of biochar. And so we're putting that on the website and printing copies of it. And then also on the webpage will be a presentation that one of the interns developed about the Inflation Reduction Act and the kinds of resources that could provide, and then a presentation on their work. So I think the web page should be up in the next couple of weeks with at least the biochar guide and the first guide and the 2 presentations. And if there's a way to have a mailing list, I could send out a notice that it's available.
Well, that's awesome, Nancy. Congrats to you and your interns, and thanks for sharing. I mean, this is a great example of something that we can add to our list, our resource list for Washington State, all these different resources. And then, yeah, it'd be great if you guys could get involved with helping develop some materials.
I will connect the new interns with you, and I think they could really help out with these next new tools.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, next from Carrie Culp. Have you heard of Tree Nation? And if so, can you comment on that program? I'm considering participating in it. I have not heard of Tree Nation. Has anyone else heard of Tree Nation?
I'll give you a 1-second description of what they do. They basically have programs all over the world. You mentioned mangroves, that's a big part of it, where you basically, either as a company or as a gift to your clients, purchase trees to be planted in they have a lot of programs actually all around the world. And so then you sort of build a forest, if you will. Because I work in residential, it's something that like families are really interested in for their kids' education and things like that. But I haven't, I don't know anyone else who's used them or worked with them. So I was just curious if anyone had heard about it.
Well, I'd love to learn more, and it'd be great if you could add that to our resource list so we can look more into it.
Sure. I was at a talk by Dr. Susan Simard, and she was saying that she thought that carbon offset credits were one of the more hopeful things that she had seen in her career. And that's what got me looking. And so, yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you. All right. We've got a note about the ASLA Climate Action Committee has a subcommittee working on carbon drawdown and biodiversity specifically, and they are working on creating databases, national for materials, and I believe for plants. So I think that's a response to that earlier for that first question.
They're merging databases because there's Pathfinder, there's all these different tools. So I think everybody wants to get on the same page to say, okay, this type of concrete has this much embedded carbon done, so that we're not looking at Tally, Pathfinder, all these other sources. So they're getting everything kind of lined up.
That's great. Great to
Yeah.
know. It sounds like that could be augmented with Washington State's specific stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the plant piece, I'm on that subcommittee.
Yes, that's one of the things that Stephanie, as the leader, and the other members of the Washington Climate Action Committee have access to all of this information that they're creating. And it's the Climate Action Committee has really grown and become, I think you perceive this too, because you've been on it for a while, Mary, it just got some people that are just really concentrating. And the other thing that they put on that site, and we can then spread out through our local webpage, is a lot of other kinds of discussions that different chapters are having and that are creating as a part of this network. So we start to know what this whole volume of information available is.
Got a great question from Graham Goldbuff. Is there an initiative to form partnerships between Western and Eastern Washington folks, something to open up conversations about distinct solutions needed on either side of the mountains? It's a great question. Right now, a lot of the representatives on the committee, other than Steve, are on the west side. We definitely want more participation from the east side. So if you are on the east side and you're listening in, please consider joining. I don't know of any specific initiatives. It's probably not in the national climate action plan, since it's not specific to Washington State. But I think that's something that we're really wanting to dig into in the committee.
That's part of the, if I can just add to that a little bit, that's part of why we started looking at the idea of regions, and that we can start to identify what are specific issues and try to get different groups together to talk about that and to act on it and define it, because we're also trying to just have that data about everywhere. So for example, when we had the meetings of the Climate Action Network with the Board of Trustees and the chapter presidents, I helped moderate the Intermountain region. And one of the things we talked about was the kinds of issues that they have that really would relate a lot more to the eastern part of Washington that are in Idaho and Colorado and Wyoming, where you've got that whole set of sort of mountain conditions without the coastal issues. So I think that that's something that the committee can really look at, is how to put together some specific webinars with other chapters that address those specific bioregions. I think that's been the real challenge, is to, it's part of a challenge of our profession, isn't it? We've got these geographic boundaries that don't necessarily mean much about what our ecoregions are. And so really trying to think about those bioregions and how do we share information about them, I think is really important. So
yeah, and to add on to that, I was in the group that met for the Pacific Northwest, the Washington State, Oregon, and Alaska, and it was great to connect with the committee leaders and members of ASLA there and hear about shared climate issues that, you know, span both the east and the west side of mountains. And so we'll be working closely with those groups as well to see how we can all share lessons learned and everything. There's some great resources being dropped into the chat, like pacifichorticulture.org. And the importance of public transit. Totally.
I wonder if I could just make a quick comment about the building transparency link that I put in.
Absolutely.
they have been, it's a private nonprofit that was supported by both Microsoft and Skanska. And basically, what it is a really remarkable consolidation of data around carbon. And it is being actively used in the industry to do things like, I think, for example, Cadman has been able to reduce their embedded carbon in concrete by 30% due to just a change in mix. And because the private power and money is there through folks like Microsoft and Skanska, the implementation of this is, and the use of this as a tool is driving forward. And it was embedded in part in the, act that you guys, the national act that you guys will all referencing later. Sorry, I've got a cold and I've got sort of limited brain cells. Stacy Smedley would be a remarkable person to have do a quick seminar on this, because she talks about how you can hack the data and the database. So it's been set up to be hackable by landscape architects and others. And she's really quite remarkable.
I just wanted to add to Barbara, because I know I had to run through so much stuff so quickly, but when I put up that DIRT article, which you can get on the webpage, that was that Building Transparency was one of the groups that ASLA met with. So we see that on the national level. How do we consolidate all these things together? And I think the more we can look at that on the regional level and the state level, that would be great.
They've got so much data.
Those people are all great resources too.
Yeah, I think the point that I would make is there's enough data there available that's being built in an ongoing manner, that it moves you from kind of getting up to speed to actionable tools.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Thank you, Barbara. Well, we're running down on minutes here. I'm just going to share the link to our webpage there, and that's where you can enter any of these resources that you're thinking of. It'd be great if you could log them there, even if you share them in the comments here, so that we can make sure they're included in that list that we're vetting through and putting together for everyone. And definitely download the Climate Action Plan cheat sheet. It's super helpful. There's so much that we have to handle and deal with in this plan. And so it's a really good way of just, what's the topic you're trying to get more information on? Here's the page, here are metrics, here's the toolkit kind of thing. And we're really excited for just collaborating with you all. This is going to definitely be something that we all need to work together on. We're excited to do that. So yeah, feel free to reach out with any questions or comments of any sort. And thank you for joining today. All right, if there are any last comments, we'll say goodbye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.